Is he running left, cuts it back right, gets a breakaway.
We'll be walking out here as national champ. I expect nothing less.
There goes Davis. Oh my God! Davis is going to run it all the way back. Dobbs heaves it. They're bunched up in the end zone. It's tipped up. It's caught. It is caught.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Saturday night in Death Valley.
GASN Sports presents the Saturday Supremacy Podcast, celebrating the passion, traditions, and pageantry surrounding college football Saturdays, featuring weekly guests and hard-hitting analysis. And now, please welcome your hosts, Noah Groniger and Clint Schweitzer.
Well, I tell you what, you guys are locked and loaded right here on the Saturday Supremacy Podcast. Clint Schweitzer and Noah Groniger joining you as always, as we have done for the entirety of the football season. And joining us today, our very special guest, someone that we can't wait when we have him on. He's always worth some tremendous quotes. He has some great things to say about the world of college football, the college football playoff, and kind of the corruption involved. Tim Brando from Fox Sports is going to be joining us. Noah, we know when that happens, it's time to buckle up because nowhere you ever want to be better than the Saturday Supremacy Podcast because you want to hear this. You want to hear what Tim Brando has to say, and we're going to get deep into it, and we're going to get a little nasty here on the podcast today, my friend.
Absolutely. Timmy B keeps it real. That's what I like to say because, man, he is always bringing it. He's going to talk to you about college football as he really sees it. He's not going to sugarcoat anything, so we always enjoy Tim Brando coming on the show. He's the best in the business. Him and his partner, Spencer Tillman, do such a great job on their Fox broadcast. They've got Wisconsin, Purdue this week, so we got to ask him about that. And we've got to go through the Big Ten, the SEC, the Pac-12, Clemson, college football as a whole. We've got a lot to talk about with Tim today, so let's get it started.
It's funny you mentioned that because you mentioned Clemson last, and I think that's sort of a, just a symbolic statement because we're forgetting about Clemson, and we're going to ask Tim about that. Are we underrating Clemson? Right now, the third-ranked team in the college football playoff. Trevor Lawrence has come along after kind of a slow start, had a decent season. He's only thrown 8 interceptions on the year. Clemson's just rolling along. Now they're murdering people. After that close win over North Carolina, they've just been obliterating people, which really you should, but maybe the system is what's creating this, and we're going to talk to Tim about that. The fact that these teams have to go out there and prove themselves every week. That's what you want, but in the long run, I feel like we're undervaluing some really good football teams out there. Alabama sitting there at 5, and we want to just write them off. They don't have any wins over a ranked team right now. Clemson, same with them, although I guess A&M has snuck back into the top 25. Okay, they have one win over a ranked team. Texas A&M, 24th. Just do we kind of undervalue teams because of the system now? That's kind of where I'm at with it. I want to just look at Penn State. They lost to Minnesota. Goodbye. We don't care about you. Minnesota, turn around and lose to Iowa. Well, we'll see you later. Baylor, 28-3 over Oklahoma. You've got a chance. Oh, wait, you blew that lead. We'll see you later. Baylor will catch you in the Alamo Bowl somewhere. Like maybe that's doing a disservice to these programs that are really building something, creating exciting games, and maybe we're undervaluing that because of the system that's created it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you've got the brands up at the top, the Clemson, the Alabama, but they haven't played anybody. They haven't beaten anybody. I mean, they've had their chances, at least Alabama has, in LSU, and they lost at home to LSU. And other than that, they haven't played anybody. Clemson hasn't played anybody. And you look at some of these other teams, and they're going through murderer's row, and they don't have anything to – yeah, they get a loss, but their schedule's tougher. They're actually going out and playing these teams, but since they don't have the brand, since they haven't proved it, since they don't have the national championships, they get penalized when, hey, roll that maroon A up in the elephant and roll Tide. You lost your quarterback. You haven't really beat anybody. You're number 5. You're going to be right in there when Georgia loses to LSU in the SEC championship game. No muss, no fuss, no problem. Clemson, you haven't beat anybody. ACC's down. Not your fault. Come all right on in the college playoff. We'll welcome you in with open arms, and we'll hope for good games.
Absolutely, and in one hand, I kind of get it because are you what if unbiased? If you're just looking at things and looking at resumes and looking at teams who've been there and proven it, are you going to put our Alabama in there that's won 5 national championships in the last 11 years, or are you going to put in Minnesota or Utah or Oregon that have not been there and proven it That's not the point of the system. This was to find the 4 best teams. I get it. Guess what? That didn't work last year either, when Georgia should clearly have been the 4th team in there instead of Notre Dame. It didn't work out that way. So that's already not what's happening. It's a beauty contest. You're trying to go up there and you're trying to, play your hits. You're trying to, play the xylophone. You're trying to sing a song, trying to sing the national anthem, and you're trying to get out there for the pollsters and for the people to see you, and you're under the bright lights. And isn't this wonderful? That's what this is all about. It's a beauty contest. Tim Brando thinks it needs to be expanded, and that's the answer. So we can get into that debate.
It'd be a different story if Tua was out there and still healthy. Then you've seen him do it, throw them into the college football playoff if Georgia does lose to LSU in the SEC championship game. And Trevor Lawrence and Dabo Swinney are still there for Clemson. So I guess you can say we're just going on resume, what they've done in the past. They're the reigning champions. Let's just put them back in. But after Alabama loses Tua and they've got Mac Jones, you're going to have to see something from Mac Jones that says, okay, we're going to slight Oregon or Utah, whoever ends up winning the Pac-12 championship. We're going to slight them and move Alabama in because of what Mac Jones has done. If Mac Jones is struggling, he's looking average, and let's say Oregon wins the Pac-12 and you still put Alabama in, I've got an issue with that. Tua's not there. If Mac Jones doesn't really wow you and just blow your socks off, blow your hair back, then I think Justin Herbert in Oregon deserves a chance to be in there with Tua out.
What's Tua's legacy at Alabama? Because you think about him coming in as a true freshman to save the day in the national championship game that year against Georgia, of course, throwing the game-winning touchdown in overtime. And then last year getting banged up and hurt, and then Jalen Hurts has to come back, and then eventually losing to Clemson in the national championship game. And then this year they have the chance under the bright lights against LSU, number 1 versus number 2, and they lose that game. And that's sort of maybe the end, and probably the end of Tua's career, at least in the college football world. I don't think he's going to take another snap at Alabama, obviously. But what is his legacy here, especially if there's questions about his durability, questions about the way he can rehab this hip injury? Maybe his career is in jeopardy going forward. What's his legacy here at Alabama and going forward?
Well, at Alabama, I think it is the legacy, kind of the phrase you can put on it is what could have been. If you're talking about his health and if he hadn't gotten banged up and Jalen didn't have to come into that game, and if he would be healthy right now and going forward, if they do make the college football playoff, what could have been at Alabama? And with Tua, yeah, they got the one championship when he came in late for Jalen, but maybe he could have had more. Maybe he could have had last year's. Maybe he could have this year's if he was completely healthy and not injury prone with the ankles and now the hip. And going forward, I'm at a loss. I'm going to have to ask Tim this because I don't know. There's now, like you said, he probably has played his last snap at Alabama, but people are talking about it. It is out there that does he come back to Alabama? Does he bet on himself? We've seen people do that before. They come back, they bet on themselves, they play their senior year. When there's talk about them coming out, maybe their junior year, they're going to go high in the draft, or maybe they're not as high as they would have liked, and they're going to bet on themselves. They're going to come back, and it depends on what Tua is hearing from the NFL, from the GMs. Is he going to slip in the draft so he feels like maybe he's going to come back and bet on himself? Does he take a whole year off and get healthy? Or is he hearing from the NFL that, no, you're still going to go high. You're going to be the second quarterback, but you're still going to go high in the draft. You're not going to lose out on a bunch of money, and we're going to roll with you there and just bet on that you'll be healthy moving forward, assuming that the surgery and everything goes fine. So we wish him the best. We hope that it's a full recovery and he gets drafted high and he plays a long time in the NFL because he is a great quarterback. He can do a lot of things. He's got a beautiful deep ball, beautiful spiral on the ball, great rotation. So we want to see him out there. We want to see some good lefties out there. Steve Young, Michael Vick, we've seen. We need another great lefty out there at quarterback. And so we're wishing the best for Tua and moving forward into the NFL.
Well, obviously, there's a lot of games this weekend. They're going to have playoff implications. I mean, LSU's a 46-point favorite over Arkansas. Oklahoma's back in action. You got Oregon heading to Arizona State, trying to keep that hope alive. Not only that, you got Georgia hosting Texas A&M, who's back in the rankings. And Noah, I know that you and I aren't the only ones that like to have more than a rooting interest in a lot of these games. So attention, past, present, and future MyBookie players. During Thanksgiving week, MyBookie is offering a risk-free bet on the Bears-Lions game. Simply choose a team against the spread for up to $250. If you win, congratulations, you've got extra holiday spending money. If you lose, congratulations to you as well. MyBookie will give you all your money back It's a no-brainer because, folks, you literally cannot lose. It's no risk, all gravy. It doesn't matter whether you're an experienced player or a first-time customer, MyBookie welcomes all to come play, so quit waiting around and sign up today. Do you find yourself wanting to sports bet but have lots of questions? Don't sweat it. MyBookie's patient customer service team can walk you through the process. And the best part is, if you join this Thanksgiving week, you'll still have one last shot to take advantage of their incredible sign-up offer. Just log on to mybookie.ag and make your first deposit with promo code SATURDAY, and MyBookie will match your deposit dollar for dollar to jumpstart your bankroll, and that's on top of the risk-free bet. Let me repeat, that's guaranteed deposit match and a risk-free bet for Thanksgiving only. So if you're a true football fan, you do not want to let this opportunity pass you by. You simply can't lose. Make sure you do your part to support your team this season. Hop on the gravy train and get in on the action with MyBookie. You play, you win, you get paid. So go to mybookie.ag, use promo code SATURDAY to win today. Well, we want to go ahead and welcome our guest on this week's podcast for the second time this season. It is Fox Sports' Tim Brando. Tim, welcome to the show once again, my friend. It's always great to have you. This is such a great time of year. College basketball started. I know you've done a couple games already. And college football season is getting ready to wind down, and we're trying to find out who is going to be eligible for the college football playoff coming up. Man, this is just a great time of year, isn't it?
No, it really doesn't. And glad to be with you today. It's that time of year when basketball is crossing over with football, and I'm going to get a little bit of a break now that the Gavitt games are over, and I won't get back into hoops now until football ends for May, which is after the first week of December. So excited about it once it gets here, but head to Madison, Wisconsin tomorrow for some more Big Ten football this weekend, and out to the West Coast for some meaningful games, possibly very meaningful for Oregon, and the potential of obviously seeing and enjoying an opportunity to be with the Apple Cup for the first time as well. So Thanksgiving, we're going to go back-to-back, Spencer and I, with two games, one being the Apple Cup and the other is yet to be determined. We'll either get Oregon State in the Civil War, or we'll get Notre Dame Stanford. We're waiting to find out which one we'll get.
Well, it's always great heading to Camp Randall, where Wisconsin is sitting pretty well right now, despite a couple losses that they've suffered. Wisconsin just coming off of a solid win over Nebraska, and just a couple weeks ago, you were there in West Lafayette and saw Purdue knock off Nebraska. I guess kind of in a roundabout way, I'm asking about Nebraska as well in this question, but how do you see Purdue? Obviously, it's been a down year for them, maybe kind of in a rebuild mode for the Boilermakers. Wisconsin doing what they do, solid as always, but both teams coming off wins over Nebraska. Nebraska's a team that you were very high on coming into this year. You had them kind of in your top 10 early on.
I did.
Kind of what's happened to them, and what do you expect on Saturday in Camp Randall?
Well, Wisconsin's got a lot to play for. I mean, they're still in the hunt to play for the Big Ten championship. They need to beat Purdue and then get their chance at Minnesota. And if they happen to beat Minnesota because of Iowa's help last week at Kinnick Stadium when they knocked off previously undefeated Minnesota, Wisconsin's in the hunt to still win the division and get to the Big Ten championship. So, they've got a lot left to play for, and they had a bad half of football at the Horseshoe. I mean, other than that, and it stuck with them for a little bit. Wisconsin paid a little bit of a price after they gave up that game to Illinois, and that wasn't just a mirage. I mean, Illinois was playing better and has evolved into a pretty good team, a bowl team perhaps even. So that wasn't nearly as fluky as we had previously thought. So I think Wisconsin has a chance to save its season, and they're playing with that kind of brawn, that kind of meaning. You can tell there's a lot of intention to their team when they went out and played Iowa. Iowa's also a very good team. It didn't shock me at all that they were able to beat Minnesota at home. They were due for a good win. They've been in a lot of close games and not converted. As it relates to Nebraska, look, I made a mistake on them. I whiffed. It happens. And the West maybe not being as strong, I thought Wisconsin actually wouldn't be as good as they actually are. Wisconsin hasn't slipped nearly as much as I thought they might. That's a credit to their coaching staff, particularly on the defensive side. Jim Leonard's a heck of a defensive coordinator, and their defense has just been lights out. But I think what also I didn't realize about Nebraska is when Scott took the program over, there were some guys that needed to be weeded out, and they were in year one, but I don't think they were all weeded out. I think that there's still some division within the ranks from the upperclassmen that were left behind. Frost is always very good publicly about not addressing the issue. Mike Riley's a really likable guy. No one wants to throw the previous coaching staff under the bus. But I think that there were issues there that even Scott Frost maybe was not as aware of when he got there. And certainly we as broadcasters weren't either. And I think that combined with the loss of Martinez a time or two at quarterback, his being nicked up, not completely healthy, had an adverse effect on them. Purdue gutted it out in that victory against Nebraska. You know, Nebraska, to me, appeared to be the more talented team, but Purdue was the more driven team and played a more intelligent brand of football. And Nebraska's been in situations many times with leads in the fourth quarter and have blown them, and that just tells you that they don't know how to finish. Purdue actually would have had and really still, in my opinion, could give Wisconsin a good game. We don't know if Rondell Moore is going to be able to go or not, but, you know, they've been doing all of this, winning these last couple of games, even the Nebraska game without Moore, and with a walk-on quarterback. You know, they're down to number 3, number 4. They're really dipping deep into the quarterback depth chart, and Jeff Brom's team has really, after that Illinois debacle and the bad weather, Purdue really righted itself, and that says a lot to me about the foundation of their program. All of Purdue's issues this year were based on injuries at key places at the wrong possible times. They would have had a season as good or maybe even better than the one they had a year ago were it not for those injuries. Jeff just hasn't been there long enough to recruit the kind of depth necessary to handle that many injuries, and that's what stymied them. I fully expect an entertaining game from Purdue against Wisconsin on Saturday.
Well, sticking with that Big Ten theme here, Tim, obviously Ohio State ranked number 2. They're the class of the Big Ten right now, but can Penn State and Minnesota kind of upset the apple cart and try to make their way back into this college football playoff discussion if there's a little bit of chaos ahead of them?
Well, I think they're poised to do that. I think there's certainly a chance that they could do that. Penn State, in my mind, has always been the team that was the most talented in the Big Ten, short of Ohio State. I think we'd all agree that Ohio State's recruiting under Urban Meyer in the entire period that he was there was light years ahead of everyone else's.
Oh yeah.
And as a result, they just have more quality depth at every position on the field. The one school that had done I think, as good a job for at least one or two of those last 4 years was Penn State. The problem was there was that 1 year there that Penn State really didn't. It was kind of a dead recruiting year for them. They are sorely lacking juniors. They have some seniors, then you go down to sophomores and freshmen. That class of 3 years ago just doesn't exist, and so they were really young in a lot of spots and old in others. And I think developing some chemistry might have been part of the problem for them a year ago. Yet they had Ohio State on the ropes and let them get away from it in the whiteout game that they had a year ago. I don't think anyone thought Shepherd was going to be good enough to step into McSorley's shoes. You see what's happened there. And I think that he's better than anticipated. And you add KJ Hamler, who is a dynamic player, to the mix. Ohio State really hasn't had to defend a player in its perimeter as good as KJ Hamler. And they've got a bevy of backs, Journey Brown probably being the best of the group, but their running backs by committee have also been pretty solid. Action the last 2 or 3 weeks. This will give their defense a better chance as well in this game against the Buckeyes. They came close at Minnesota. That was the game of the century, really, from that program at Minnesota. Penn State, short of a penalty, might have been able to pull it off and actually win that game. I see no reason for them to not give the maximum effort and be in a position. Listen, Ohio State hasn't been tested. You know, we talk a lot about how dominant they appear to be, and they have, but they haven't gone up against a team as talented as Penn State yet. And we will see how they handle, you know, being pushed to the limit by a team that has some athletes that would measure up on any depth chart close to Ohio State's level of talent. And I think that's going to be one of the things to really keep an eye on this Saturday.
Yeah, we heard about that a lot in the NFL with the Patriots, and then they finally played a good team in the Ravens and got pounded. So we'll see what Ohio State can do in the college ranks with that as well.
Yeah, no question.
Well, as we power forward towards the college football playoff, we have some things to sort out here, Tim, and I know that you're someone that's a big believer in the college football playoff committee's belief in the school's brand. And as we sit right now, numbers 5, 6, and 7, Alabama, Oregon, and Utah, neither one of them have a win over a ranked team. How is this going to play out? Assuming LSU beats Georgia in the SEC championship game, how does the committee sort this out, and how would you sort it out, more importantly?
Well, I've seen Utah with my own eyes 2 of the last 3 weeks and 4 weeks, and they're really good. Now, their schedule, you can poke holes in their non-conference schedule, no doubt about it, but you could also poke holes, big-time holes into Alabama's. They're playing that powerful Western Carolina this week.
Ooh.
A lovely FCS week in the SEC where they only play 8 conference games. Listen, Oregon is developed into a much better team than the one that lost to Auburn as well. I think a lot would depend. It does basically look this way to me if you're reading the tea leaves. Oklahoma, I really thought, had a very good chance playing an undefeated Baylor team to get some bump. But apparently they didn't get any bump. In fact, they dropped a spot, and I think it's in large measure because Baylor gets just absolutely no credit whatsoever for being a really good team. Minnesota, I think, is getting a little more love as one of the upstarts because they actually beat Penn State, who was ranked number 4 at the time. But, the truth is Oklahoma could beat Baylor again in the Big 12 title game, and I don't know how much it would mean. Now, if you look at the Pac-12, Oregon, because it played not just an Auburn team in a game on August the 31st that they had control of, they had control of that game for 3.5 quarters, but did not finish the game. Auburn wound up winning it. If Auburn gets their doors blown off by Alabama in the Iron Bowl, I still believe Alabama, because of its brand, because of its history, has a very good shot at moving into the 4 position, assuming LSU beats Georgia in the SEC championship. Bama privilege and pure playoff privilege belongs to these brand names. No one in that committee room is ever going to convince me otherwise. I've watched it and seen it too often. Now, if Utah and Oregon continue to win and are on this collision course for the Pac-12 title, and they put on a really good show, I don't care who wins. In my estimation, that team deserves to be in the 4 position far more than Alabama, who played no one non-conference, who's only played one top 25 team to date and lost to them at home, and that being LSU. And unless they change the narrative for themselves by beating Auburn badly, that would be the only way, if you're a committee member, you could look at it and say, wait a minute, Oregon, the team we're talking about sliding into the 4 position, lost to Auburn, who lost head-to-head big time at home to Alabama. That's the only way that, in my opinion, you could get in Alabama over the Pac-12 one-loss champion, whether it's Oregon or Utah. But there's a very good chance that could still happen, fellas. I mean, it could.
Yeah.
A lot of people have counted out Alabama before. They lost to Auburn in the Iron Bowl a few years ago and still got in without playing in the SEC title. And what did they do? They won the national championship.
Yeah.
So you can never rule them out.
Well, continuing with the brand, Alabama, I got to get your thoughts on Tua, his unfortunate hip injury there at the tail end of that first half. What do you think he does moving forward? Does he chance it and go into the draft when a lot of GMs have come out and they're questioning him? Is he injury prone? Does he take a year off and just get healthy? Or does he go back to Alabama and bet on himself and say, I'm going to show you I can stay healthy for a full season. I can be the same Tua, dynamic. What would you do? What advice would you give Tua if you were in that room with him, being able to give him advice?
Well, I don't think that, or nor would I ever presume to be in that position, but I would be shocked if he went back to Alabama. I think he's played his last down there. Whether he went back and played another year at Alabama would not change the images and impressions that people already have of him at the pro level. He's quite frankly one of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen in Southeastern Conference football history. But he has been injury prone. And by the way, a lot of guys that were great quarterbacks were injury prone. Joe Namath back in the mid-'60s was injury prone.
Oh, yeah.
But that didn't stop him from being a top pick and one of the transformational quarterbacks in the history of the pro game as well as the college game. He's definitely going to do that. And I think that if what people are saying, those that project such things about the National Football League and what his draft position would be, he would go probably number 2 after Joe Burrow, even with the injuries, as long as he comes out of it cleared and it's considered a successful surgery. But I think that the NFL, as you know, is always going to question well beyond what the surgeons say or what those that have been clearing him and talking up his medical team have already said. They're going to, checks and balances are far greater there. And you never know about an athlete that's gone through that kind of surgery until after he's rehabbed. And if his rehab goes extremely well, then I think he's probably going to be taken in the first 10, 11, 12 picks of the first round. And as I said, I don't see anyone going ahead of him other than Joe Burrow, who has certainly earned that right with the kind of season he's had at LSU.
Well, that's very well said, Tim, and we got a lot more questions for you coming up here. It's always great to have you on the podcast, but I'll tell you what, as things are heating up on the football field here, guys, it's time to start thinking about heating things up in the bedroom. Guys, do you remember the days when you were ready to go at the drop of a hat in the bedroom? Now you can increase your performance and get that extra confidence in bed. Listen up. Blue Chew brings you the first chewable with the same FDA-approved active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis, so you know they work. You can take them anytime, day or night, even on a full stomach. And since they're chewable, they work up to twice as fast as a pill, so you can be ready to go whenever the opportunity strikes. Blue Chew has made all the difference in the bedroom for me personally, and if you could benefit from extra function and more confidence where it counts, Blue Chew is the fast and easy way to enhance your performance. Most guys talk a good game, but Blue Chew helps you follow through. Blue Chew is prescribed online and shipped straight to your door in a discreet package, so no in-person doctor's visit, no waiting in line at the pharmacy, and best of all, no more awkwardness. They're made in the USA, and since Blue Chew prepares and ships direct, they're cheaper than a pharmacy. Right now, we've got a special deal for our listeners. Visit BlueChew.com and get your first shipment free when you use our special promo code SATURDAY. You just pay $5 shipping. Again, that's BlueChew.com. Promo code Saturday to try it free. Thanks so much to Blue Chew for sponsoring the podcast this week. And remember, Blue Chew is the better, cheaper, faster choice. Well, let's talk about those LSU Tigers. I mean, it's hard to imagine LSU with the prestige that they have as a university with 2 national championships here just in recent memory. But what a feel-good story it almost is. I mean, we were there at SEC Media Days talking with Ed Orgeron, with Joe Burrow, and you just got this real sense about what this team was going to be this year. No one could have predicted maybe the stats or just how good Joe Burrow would be, but talk about the importance of Ed Orgeron bringing in Joe Brady and kind of transforming this offense. And I know Ed Orgeron, someone that you sat down with not long after he got hired at LSU. Could you have foreseen that he could get to this program to the point that it has gotten in just 3 years' time?
Yeah, I did. I really thought that he could shock the world and be one of the great success stories of college football in the modern era. And I think he's, regardless of what happens the rest of the way, I mean, even if they get to the playoff and get knocked off, this is still an incredible breakthrough year for them to completely overhaul their offensive philosophy and see a guy like Burrow go from a 58% completion percentage quarterback to an 80%. I think he's just under 80% in his completion percentage, to have thrown for, 35, 36 touchdown passes,
Mm-hmm.
36 with 4 picks. I mean, are you kidding me? That's just unbelievable. But I think it also says a lot about Orgeron's maturation as a head coach. He was admittedly one of these control freaks as a head coach when he got his first opportunity at Ole Miss. He wouldn't delegate. He tried being a position coach at every position as opposed to being a head coach and allowing some autonomy to his assistants. He learned from that mistake, and especially so when he took over as an interim at USC. And USC really dropped the ball not hiring him and hiring Steve Sarkisian when they did. Orgeron was ready to be a head coach then, and USC blew it. And their loss was LSU's, that was a great find for them. It was a gain for the Bayou to get one of their own to come in who talks their language and identifies with the fans and the people and the imagery of South Louisiana. And all he's done is bring in the best possible staff you could get. Even though they're struggling from a defensive standpoint statistically, Dave Aranda is one of the most highly thought of and talked about defensive coordinators in the country and did a remarkable job at Wisconsin that Jim Leonard was able to take over and continue to perform admirably. They've had some injuries and they've had some attrition on the defensive side. And they've played a lot of good teams. When you play more good teams on your schedule, you're going to give up a little bit more, and LSU did. But I think that when you look at that, plus the hiring of Joe Brady from Sean Payton's offense, who had worked so closely with Sean and knew and understood with the kind of offense that they were running with Drew Brees, how to get things accomplished in the red zone, and to be the number one offense in the red zone, as LSU is just an amazing adjustment, and would not have been made possible had it not been for the incredible humility of an offensive coordinator who's almost my age. He's just a little over 60, 61 years old. Steve Ensminger was a quarterback who shared time with the late David Woodley the first year I was covering LSU football 40 years ago in 1979. Steve was from Central High School in Baton Rouge. He had been around. He had run some offenses, but he wanted to come home and be a positions coach to run out his career. So he moved back to Louisiana, took a job as the tight ends coach. And then after the Les Miles debacle took place and the opportunity presented itself for Steve to become the OC, Orgeron trusted him and said, "You're my guy." And then right after that happened, they have an opportunity to get Joe Brady, and Ensminger was like, "Hey man, whatever makes us better, let's do it." And Brady idolizes, for everyone I've talked to, the Joe Brady-Steve Ensminger relationship is like a big brother, little brother type thing. The big brother understands and has wisdom. The little brother's trying to push the envelope. The big brother says, "Well, let's do it this way first and see if it works out." And they both are in awe of one another. And it's just been a great relationship that's transformed this LSU offense into something exceedingly special.
Oh, absolutely has. And Tim, we almost went a whole podcast, and we haven't mentioned the number 3 team in the country, Clemson. And I don't think that's just us here. I think that's kind of all over all the shows on national television, on radio. They're kind of going under the radar here. I mean, Trevor Lawrence, 8 interceptions, still having a very nice year. They had that close game with North Carolina early in the season. Looks like they're kind of catching stride here. And is it justified that they're going under the radar here and no one's really talking about them?
Yeah, it is justified. They haven't played anybody that's been jazzy enough for us to pay attention. I mean, and I agree with Mike Oresco, the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference, who said today and late last night that the hypocrisy of the committee is showing, rearing its ugly head all over again. Clemson's schedule this year is every bit as bad as UCF's the last 2 years, and that program was vilified and told, forget about it. You have no chance. you don't belong in our conversation. And yet Clemson's like automatically in the 3-hole, and no one asks any questions because they're the reigning champions. They're in the ACC, who's part of the cartel, and the American isn't. And I would tell you right now, pound for pound, team for team, the American Conference is a better league than the ACC. Now, I don't want to blame Clemson because the ACC stinks. They got to play who they got to play.
Yeah.
But other than Texas A&M, who's the 6th or 7th best team in the SEC, who have they played that matters this year in college football? So it speaks to many of the ills of the sport and why, with the scheduling inequities the way they are from conference to conference, we have got to expand this thing. The college football playoff format structure is corrupt, and it leaves itself open for all kinds of, in my opinion, criticism across the board, with all kinds of, in my view, contradictory issues that they cannot escape, from having administrators from conference schools that are part of the cartel to a spokesperson that has to leave the room because his team is being discussed. The veil of impropriety is all around them. And we've got to address this, and we've got to address it quickly. Otherwise, college football is going to continue to lose its grip as the second most popular sport in America. It's already during the week on television, whether it's FS1 or ESPN, almost ignored by all of the programming that's out there. Now, we could debate whether that programming is legitimate or not, all we want. But what I will tell you is NBA and NFL drama dominates it, and college football has become a colossal bore nationally because we only get 4 teams in, and we all know probably who 3 of those 4 teams will be as far back as July.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We've got to ignite the sport again and give it some juice, and the only way to do that is through expansion.
Yeah, you hear about the boxing corruption for the entire history that boxing has been around, and now not enough is talked about in the NCAA and what's going on, and whether it's college football or college basketball. And it's good to hear you bring that up, and that it's got to change, and there needs to be expansion so we can kind of get rid of some of that.
Absolutely.
Well, Tim, it's crazy because we had a very similar conversation back in August, right before the season started, and now here we are with it playing out exactly as we had predicted back then, and so that just speaks to your point. Here we are.
Yeah, I trust me, I hate like hell being Nostradamus, but you don't have to be too intelligent to get this storyline right in college football these days.
Tim, we can't thank you enough. We always do it a couple times a year during the college football season, and I know we'll do it again maybe during college basketball. And we're working on a time where we can come down and get you on camera for our documentary coming up maybe this spring. We're going to work on it. We're going to iron out a date, and we just can't thank you enough for all that you do for us and coming on and talking college football. It means the world, and it's you're absolutely the best. We can't wait to watch on 3:00 on Fox, of course, this weekend as Wisconsin hosts Purdue. You and Spencer are the best in the business, and we can't wait to. And we'll definitely be watching, Tim. Thank you so much.
Thank you, fellas. My pleasure always. Take care.
Always a pleasure here. Thanks.
All right, buddy. Y'all be well. Bye-bye.
You too.
Man, strong words, Noah, from Tim Brando, bringing it once again, referring to college football as being woefully boring because of the fact and because of the system. And I alluded to that in our intro, talking about the system. Maybe it's creating a situation where as the season goes on, you've got games that are just existing to exist, and it's unfortunate because college football is so wonderful, all the great passions and the traditions and all that we've experienced going around this conference in the SEC, that is, and it's like there's so many games that are just meaningless right now, and that's unfortunate. I think an expansion, bringing it to 6 or 8 teams, you still would have teams very much invested in the season and what's going to happen. Even 2 lost teams like Wisconsin. You'd have Minnesota and Baylor and teams like that, just right there on the cusp. So strong words from Tim Brando. That's been the second time we've had him on this year, and every time we do, he's a good friend, and I really don't know. He's just one of the greats when it comes to analyzing this game, and college football means so much to him and to us. We just want to see it. Like he said, you want to see college football stand pat as the second biggest sport in America behind the NFL.
Yeah, you really do. You don't want to see it slip. He's talking there about corruption. I brought up boxing, how that's always a big thing, and the sport's kind of fallen because of it. People watch it and they see the judges' scorecards and they know it's corrupt and they know that pockets have been lined and you don't want to see that happen in the NCAA. And like you mentioned, people having to step out of rooms because of their affiliation with the team, and they know that they can't be biased, or they're going to be biased. They can't be unbiased, and that they're going to vote for their team, so they have to take a step out of the room. And it's just sad to see. And hopefully, like you said, with expansion, we can get rid of some of that, and we can get a more level playing field. And like you mentioned, teams really playing it all the way through and still having something to fight for and meaningful games down the stretch.
Well, I've got to ask you, Noah, because, obviously here in Kansas City and credentialed members of the SEC media, we cover Mizzou on a weekly basis. I was there last weekend sitting in the press box looking straight ahead and just wondering what's going on. Obviously, this show, we are heavily involved in the college football playoff and the championship games and what's going on, but we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up what's going on at Missouri right now. No, this is a team that we were both so high on. Even after losing to Wyoming, they got to 5-1. They were ranked 22nd in the polls. And then the wheels just came off inexplicably. Barry Odom could not have this happen, and he has. The Missouri fan base is just so tired of this roller coaster ride. Derek Dooley this week, offensive coordinator, says right now they're living in football hell. What is going on at Missouri? And is the university even in the position to either move on from Barry Odom? It's almost like they're stuck in an abyss. Move on from him or bring him back. They don't really have the financials to buy him out and to try to start this thing over. But then again, they also can't afford 10,000 empty seats every game next year at Faurot Field. What does Missouri do right now? This is just, no one could have foreseen this. It's unbelievable.
It really is. Hashtag Barry. I'll give you a second to think about that. But yeah, they need a spark in that program. And if that's going to come from a new coach, you mentioned the financials. Can they really afford to buy him out and go after a new sexy coach that's going to bring the fans in? Kelly Bryant moving on, the quarterback's coming in. I don't think there's a sexy option there. After Drew Lock, I mean, we haven't seen Kelly Bryant play consistent football, stay healthy the whole time, and we're going to move forward. I just don't think there's a sexy option there. Can you go get someone? I think they have to find a way to make a move at coach. They've got to get rid of Barry Odom. They've got to do something else. But like you said, can they afford to do that? What do they're in an abyss. I'm talking about these different options. What can they do? We don't know, but it doesn't appear that they can really do much of anything as far as a sexy option to get fans excited, to put a great product on the field. And so, yeah, that lends to us being in an abyss, and that's not exciting for us. We're here covering Mizzou. We go to these games. We're credentialed members of the media there, and it's not exciting to go and cover this team that looks lost on offense. There's been injuries on defense. Cale Garrett and he's a spark on that defense and creating plays and turnovers and getting the crowd excited, and now that's gone, and Kelly Bryant's been hurt and he's been inconsistent, and the coaching staff has been out-coached several weeks here and throughout most of the season, and so it is an abyss, and there's got to be some way to right the ship, and we'll leave that to other people to figure out what needs to be done, because I'm at a loss here.
Well, no, I think you said the word sexy 4 times during that, and really, obviously, it's sort of subconscious because Blue Chew's a sponsor this week, and I think that it just comes to mind. It's just something it overtakes you when you're dealing with Blue Chew. You can't go wrong, for one, if you're a guy, and that all that talk. I'm making a sexy coach, a sexy hire. Man, that word is just going to permeate for me the rest of this time. But you're very right about everything you said there. I don't know what Missouri does. I don't know if this is going to be the year, because going into the year next year with no excitement, this was the most hype you've had about Missouri football in a long time, and they've laid the biggest possible egg when they could not afford to do it. It's inexplicable, but that's the state of the program right now. And there's a lot of programs that are out there very similar to Missouri, places like Ole Miss right now, Mississippi State. I think Kentucky's overperformed a little bit, and Tennessee's gotten better, but there's some programs that are just middling right now that are trying to find their way, keep their head above water. Arkansas so far has been the only one that's managed not to keep their head above water.
I like what I've seen out of Vanderbilt and Arkansas. I like those two programs, where they're headed in the future.
Derek Mason's coming back. We know Vanderbilt's going to have a coach next year. We know it's going to be Derek Mason. He got the dreaded vote of confidence. So
they're ahead of Arkansas there, so that they can hold their heads high in Vanderbilt.
Well, I'll tell you what, guys, it's always such a pleasure to have Tim Brando on our show. Hits to him so much for coming on and doing this with us a couple times during each football season. Man, I'll tell you what would be a great podcast. It's a Tim Brando podcast. We're working on it all the time. I'm just going to text him right now and say, Tim, what's it going to take? We need you to have a college football podcast because I think he'd be a perfect voice of reason. And I don't know, I just think it'd be tremendous. Guys, our website, gasnsports.com, it's where all of our shows are archived, all of our articles, always covering the SEC, covering the NFL, covering sports in general. It's all there, gasnsports.com. It is the Great American Sports Network. It is the banner to which everything that we do falls under. Of course, you can subscribe to us here on Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, or Apple Podcasts, and any way you choose to take in the show, just hit that subscribe button. Always feel free to share it and give us some feedback. Let us know how we're doing, what other guests you'd like to hear, what other topics you'd like to hear covered here on Saturday Supremacy, what sponsors you'd like to hear. Big thanks to Blue Chew and MyBookie.ag for sponsoring this week's podcast. Cannot thank them enough. It's been a great pleasure working with our great sponsors that want to get in on this podcast and sponsor it. We appreciate them so much. Thank you so much. Enjoy the games this weekend. I know, Noah, you and I will be doing so. We'll be doing it with MyBookie.ag.